Hello, welcome to the Gryphon Financial Partners webinar, Preseason Game Plan, Preparing Athletes for NIL, Recruiting, and Player Development. So at Gryphon Financial Partners, our mission here is to make people's lives better. And one of the ways we're going to try to do that is try to help those of you out there that might have children that are high-performing athletes or those that work with high-performing athletes. So if you're a coach, administrator, really anyone that's working with a kid that's likely going to run into an NIL situation or potentially trying to get into one of the leagues. So my name's Mark Fleming. I'm a senior investment director here at Gryphon Financial Partners. We have three amazing panelists here with us. Our first panelist is CJ Saunders. He's the head of our sports division here at Gryphon Financial Partners, working with both student athletes and professional athletes, although today, like we're going to talk about in this presentation, can kind of be one and the same. He's a former captain for the Ohio State Buckeyes, had the privilege of playing for both Urban Meyer and Ryan Day during his playing days. And he also played for both the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons in the NFL. We have Justin VanFulpen. He's an NFLPA certified agent with over 20 years experience covering representation, scouting, NIL strategy, draft prep, and contract negotiations. So he's just a tremendous source for information about the business of sports. And then through the eyes of a player, we have Markus Bailey, a former Purdue Boilermaker, star linebacker, two-time team captain. He was drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, where he was able to play in the Super Bowl for one of the only times in recent memory that an Ohio team has gotten to make it to that particular game. So Markus brings us great insight into what's going on in the mind of the players and in the locker room. So with that, we're going to dig in with our panelists here. So our first question for the panel is, the landscape, it's really evolving, and we don't expect that to change. So with that being said, in each of your perspectives, what's changed the most in high school and college athletics over the last 5 years? CJ, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the kind introductions. It's a pleasure to be speaking here today with this panel. And so, as you kind of mentioned, a lot has happened, a lot has changed. Even since when I played, I finished my collegiate career in 2019 at Ohio State, and then went on and played a few years in the NFL. And I think in general, the space has become a lot more complex. Not only are families and athletes navigating recruiting, right? What's a good fit for our family as a player, but you also have contracts, you have taxes to deal with, right? You have potential branding and endorsement and kind of your image in that light. And so I just think there's a lot more happening in the high school and collegiate landscape of sports. And not only on the player side, but also the family side, helping them navigate that, right? If your mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, whoever it is in their sphere, you're still trying to raise like a successful young daughter, son, like all of that still is in the picture. So I just think in general, it's become a lot more complex. And so hopefully conversations like these where awareness and education are important. I think that's at the front as if not that it hasn't always been important, but I think in today's age it has become even more important.
Yeah, and it's a piggyback there on what CJ said. I think the biggest thing comes with it's basically pay for play now in terms of we see as far as the rev share, and it's really been more of a business than ever before. Starting in the high school range, as far as some states allow in terms of even high school players to, as far as get NIL deals, get as far as marketing deals and different things like that. That doesn't impact their eligibility like before. It would impact their eligibility if they received money in high school far as on the college level, but that hasn't been the case now in terms of what we see. It's really in terms of like CJ was talking about, far as the contracts, things that are getting in place. So it's more far as a business than it ever was, and not just in terms of with scholarships, but in terms of now as far as the schools can actually far as pay the players, especially on the football standpoint, in other sports as well. But obviously, the two big revenue sports in terms of football and basketball. So I think that the biggest landscape we've seen in the last 5 years is the rev share, the pay for play, as far as the NIL aspect of things when it comes to the high school recruiting space.
Yeah, just like Justin said, obviously he's on the representation side. I went through, just like CJ, playing in college athletics, but missed NIL, unfortunately, the pay for play. I think the biggest change is what is prioritized and what is incentivized. Before, I mean, it was truly just you're looking at player development, relationship building, and your fit with that organization and those coaches that will be coaching you. But now, I mean, the pressure is and the incentivization is like how much can I get paid and how much how much opportunity am I going to have? But it's from a different perspective. There's so many guys in college now that are not staying at one university for their entire time. Guys are looking to transfer, looking for the next best thing, and these are underdeveloped men, adolescents that are trying to figure out the best thing for them. They see their peers. You look at social media and you see people getting paid large amounts of their position. Well, that creates a comparison thing, and that incentivizes those kids to want those things. So it's a difference in the prioritization than what it used to be when we were playing.
That's great. Yeah, I can't imagine being a teenager trying to make these long-term decisions of, going to the place that's going to pay me the most and going to, the place that's going to develop me the most and help me the most in the long term. So, guys, what trends should coaches, administrators, and families be paying attention to?
I think when you ask what trends, a lot comes to my mind, but I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that uh, there are more questions than ever, right? As this complexity builds, there are more problems to solve, more things to deal with, and so I just think families navigating this process have more questions than ever. So if you are a coach, again, administrator, if you're someone in that sphere of influence for a young athlete. I don't think you necessarily need to become a financial expert. I don't think you need to become an agent on the representation side, but I do think almost being a problem solver and being able to guide those families and those athletes that you coach, mentor, and lead in the right direction. I think that's something that may not have been around, right, 5, 10, 15 years ago when you think about the quote unquote coaching space. So I think just as questions continue to come up, I think you as a coach, administrator, I think you're starting to maybe field some more of those questions. So just being prepared to be able to, hey, guide those families in the right direction, be aware of what's going on in the ecosystem. I think that's probably the biggest trend that I would pay attention to.
Yeah, to piggyback a little bit on what CJ said, some of there's a few trends that I think about. One is the importance of financial literacy at a younger age for athletes than what it was in the past. I think about my time going into the NFL and as my later years in college, and that was looking like that was going to be the route for me. That was when it started to be emphasized. I think if you're a highly recruited high school athlete, I mean, you need people that you can trust and that have competence in this field around you to help you with the basics of financial literacy. And that's very challenging and difficult to accept a young high school athlete, 16, 17, 18 years old, to be thinking long term and think about their portfolio diversification and things like that. So you definitely need someone that has experience and has their best interest in mind on their side. Another trend in terms of just what schools are looking for, I think if you look at who won the national championship last year and how they won it, with IU, colleges are now wanting to bring in proven players at the collegiate level from maybe mid-tier D1 or FCS schools, but they've proven that they can perform and be productive starters at that level. So it makes it kind of more challenging for some of the mid-tier high school athletes that would have gotten offers before, that some of those offers are going to kids in the transfer portal. So it decreases opportunity for some of these high school athletes that could have gotten opportunities or committed sooner, but now those are going to be going towards the 20, 21-year-olds that are at different schools. And then the last trend I'll speak about is, because of the transfer portal, the retention is as much of a priority, if not more, than recruiting. Because if you are a college staff, you want to keep your best players, but because of the way that the system is set up and everyone is their own brand, and the comparison with social media, people are, and their kids, they're looking for the next best thing. So these are things that I'm seeing that is definitely affecting how this all plays out for college athletics.
Yeah, and as far as go to kind of piggyback what Mark was saying, I think the biggest trend is that high school football players are getting less high value executable far as scholarship offers, than them in the past. I think far as the numbers have proven that out there, in terms of before you could see guys getting, in terms of even lower far as non-power five offers, that they're not getting anymore. As far as, let's just talk about in kind of in this Midwest, the MAC. As far as those guys aren't getting the offers out of high school that they used to get, because they are looking to go more in the transfer portal, looking for more for guys that are vested in there. And same thing on the NFL side, talking with NFL scouts, as far as be able to go through those small schools that are non-power fours, they're not going as far as much there, because they're just waiting for those guys who maybe even at a D2 level, or a far as max type level, to move up to the Ohio States or the Michigan States there. So I think that's the far as biggest trend. And it starts in the high school level, where those guys aren't getting far as really those true scholarships that they would be able to get it. So it's hurting in terms of the high school recruiting, and those opportunities for the high school players, to even get an opportunity to kind of get into that pipeline there, versus what it was in the past.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and just like my head's starting to think about how, that might affect just like player development. And these guys, they're not getting into these elite programs that really know how to develop players. They're playing somewhere else, and especially kids that don't have a lot of other opportunities for them, and like really need the universities to provide the opportunities. So with that, so what you guys say are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have when it comes to NIL and representation?
I think the biggest thing is how much money is actually out there, in the structure and the language of the deals. I think in terms of when we look at, far as kind of like Mark was talking about, people talking about how much money is out there in terms of the NIL, are those really far as deals that people are getting there? What's the structure? What's far as the payments schedule there? I think that's there, in terms of schools are trying to protect themselves, being able to say, okay, hey, we're going to put a payment structure in there, so that the athlete couldn't necessarily get into the portal. If he does, he's going to miss out on that payment. So really, I think that's a big thing. And then in terms of, hey, what type of money is really out there, depending on, hey, are you a 5-star? Or what position? And having, as far as all that information, in your really far as kind of ideas there, what you're able to expect when it comes to far as scholarships, rev share, NIL, marketing deals, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I just what Justin said about how much money is out there. I think because NIL is so prevalent, every kid and every parent of a kid thinks that their kid deserves NIL or deserves a certain amount of NIL. And it's just like with anything in our system, the largest concentration of the wealth is in a small percentage of those that are deemed and perceived as being elite. And so it's, for the majority of college athletes, they're not going to have life-changing money coming in. Also, people have a misconception about what NIL even is. So NIL is your name, image, and likeness. But there are two buckets. You have your collective revenue share that these conferences and schools have, that they have NIL funds and collective revenue shares that they are able to choose how they allocate amongst their sports. And as Justin said in the beginning, it's mostly football and men's basketball. But the athletic departments have their jurisdiction of how they want to allocate those funds. That's separate than an athlete just getting a brand deal on his own, like having using his social media platform to get brand deals, or you partnering with a brand. Those are two separate things. So the total amount of money that a highly productive or highly touted recruit could get, a lot of it could come from the revenue share, but a lot of it also comes from their own personal branding. And so that's there's two different things. And that's what NIL was intended for initially, was just for athletes to be allowed to use their own name, image, and likeness and leverage their brands online, or however, to be able to be compensated for it. Now it's developed into an entire system, which it needs to be. But those are the two misconceptions I see.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that for those athletes and those families that are seeing NIL opportunities, that is going to last forever, right? Those that have experienced sports through college or in the professional level, right? Sports is going to come to an end for all of us. And so I think the biggest misconception on the athlete side is that, hey, this is normal and expected, is that this is going to last for the next 5, 10, 15 years, when it's like, hey, you realistically have this short window. So I think just having that perspective, and I encourage athletes, like, hey, take full advantage of these opportunities. Like, it's amazing. It's awesome. With that being said, having, as we've mentioned, that team that can give you that perspective that, hey, let's use this, let's be good stewards of this opportunity, because those that have experienced it and been out of the game know that doesn't always last forever. So I think that's kind of the biggest psychology behind, hey, how long does this really last? And we have this short window.
Yeah, that's yeah. I just can't, having never been through it myself, that yeah, to go through such a short period and such a short earnings time period, and to keep that long-term focus. So what would one piece of recruiting advice you'd give to players and those listening to take back to the athletes that they might know or they might work with?
I can go ahead there. It's and just jump in, I think, because I was think through that question is, I think you'd want to treat everyone with respect, right? Is that you never know where relationships are going to go. You don't know what coaches are going to move, what administration is going to change. So I think the big thing is that you treat people with respect, and just understanding that the value of each relationship is significant. And whether you commit to somebody, whether you go play for somebody, you just never know how that's going to impact your journey. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that I could give, is that, hey, continue to emphasize treating everyone with respect and controlling what you can control.
Yeah, and to piggyback kind of what CJ said in terms of not burning bridges, I think that's the biggest thing. So we see in terms of the movement for coaches, every cycle there as far as, and also just being as far as straight up and honest with a coach, or with somebody in the personnel department, as far as when you're at that school, to let them know kind of where you're at there, so that, again, you never know in terms of what those relationships are going to be able to do. So far as being honest and being forthright, and not burning bridges, I think is the best policy there when it comes to the recruiting space.
Yeah, definitely not burning bridges, as both these guys said, and your reputation. You never want to, because you never know where a coach is going to end up, or a former teammate eventually will end up later in life. So, as CJ said, treat everyone with respect, represent yourself the way you want to be presented. Um, and then I think there's a phrase that my high school coach used to tell me, and I think even in this era, it's a little different, but it still holds true, is you're not making a decision for your next 4 years, you're making a decision for the next 40 years. And that is you have your college athletic career, but you need to be able to understand what that university can offer for you in terms of the network and connections, thinking about what you want to do outside of football or after football is over. That way you can tap into the alumni network of those institutions and be well connected and put yourself in a good spot to get opportunities for a job later in life or whatever that alumni network offers that other universities may not offer, what they're known for. That's just something as parents and coaches helping these athletes go through the process. It would be good to help, maybe do your research and due diligence to help them make a decision from that perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I always say that just in business, you always interact with someone like you plan to work with them again in the future. And I guess being, older now and having lots of gray hair, I've had enough times where things have cycled back or, people, recommend you because, even though maybe you weren't a good fit for each other, for some reason, they know someone who is. So, I think that's just kind of great life advice to just treat every interaction like you're going to see that person again. Um, so Justin, what is the value of having an agent on your side during the recruiting process and then even beyond?
Yeah, I think as far as the biggest thing when it comes to information, and information is power. Also, in terms of like we talked in the past, in terms of protection, when it comes to the structure of, as far as the contracts, payment structures there, really as far as knowledge of the market, whether it comes, on the high school, college, or NFL sides, knowing in terms of what the market bears there, who's out there, as far as players there, be able to increase in terms of the value. And really, the main thing is allowing the players to be a player, a parent to be a parent there, coaches to be able to coach. I think as far as when you keep things separate, is able to keep things moving. As far as when you're talking about negotiating contracts, people in terms of if they're can get their feelings hurt, in terms of what they think their value is, whether it's the parent side or the player side there. So having somebody that third party that can kind of keep everybody at the table, and be able to keep that information flowing and know how to be able to structure things so that at the end of the day, it's a win-win for everybody. And really, so everybody can kind of keep their roles where they need to be there.
I think that's great. Having a third party that can talk about you is always a great help too. You can't walk into a room and tell coaches how great you are. It's good to have a third party that's the person that can say that and, represent you and say good things about you. So, Justin, how early should families be thinking about representation and looking to evaluate agents? And how can the people listening that work with young athletes really help them navigate that conversation?
Well, I think it's right now, it's never too real early to be able to talk with somebody, on that level in terms of the agent stuff there. I mean, mostly we see kind of in this high school space, juniors, kind of that junior year, people are starts talking to, or for as that's kind of going into their senior year as well when they're starting up official visits, kind of that schedule there. To be able to familiar with in terms of the contracts that are going in terms of where people are in the kind of that pecking order, when it comes to what schools for his interest there. So I don't think there's ever, too early to be able to kind of get yourself familiar with kind of the people, in that space. And I think when you're looking at it there, you really want to do as far as the background there. There's a lot of people that can say they're agents, can say they're as far as NIL agents, but really, for as especially on the football side, I mean, the NFLPA does a great job in terms of vetting people, having to do background checks, having to, as far as past tests, having to have insurance. So there's some things there versus guys that, what we call kind of street agents there. So be able to have that information, be able to do background information, whoever you're talking to, but it's never too early to get familiar with the process, familiar with people that you're potentially going to be working with, not only in terms of in that college cycle, but also in the NFL side.
That's great. So guys, so we know obviously athletics, it's really important part of the recruiting process. But can you maybe talk to the importance of character and how that can impact a student athlete's career?
Great question. And I think it matters probably more than people realize. Yes, your skill is going to open a certain amount of doors, but your character and who you are, right, can keep those doors open. And so I think too in the recruiting process, right, like I was not a heavily recruited guy, but some of the teammates I was fortunate enough to play with is that uh, college coaches, and then when you go to the NFL level, like those coaches when they're scouting, they're asking everything, right? Yes, the tape is important, but they're also, hey, how does this guy treat his teammates, right? How does he interact with coaches? Is he serious about his business and kind of carries himself in that way? And so I think all of that goes back to who you are, right? When no one's watching, it's that character. At the end of the day, yes, it is very important to as you want to keep rising, you got to be a certain level of player. But with that being said, I think you can create opportunities for yourself by how you treat your teammates, how you treat the staff, and those in the community that you interact with. So I think it's probably an underrated piece of what coaches kind of ask for and look for in the recruiting process.
Yeah, it's definitely underrated and overlooked part of it. I mean, your character and your reputation is what determines what people say about you when you're not in the rooms. It could lead to opportunities that you may have not have had otherwise. Coaches and NFL teams, whoever's evaluating anyone for any type of position, they're looking at, can we trust this guy? Has he proven that he will do what he said he's going to do? He's going to keep his word. How does this guy respond to adversity? Is he coachable? Can he receive constructive criticism? Does he shut down? These are all pieces of the pie that determine, how likable you are and how much someone in a position of authority is going to relinquish some responsibility and power to you and vouch for you. I mean, a lot of it is it's similar to dating. I mean, your physical traits can only get you so far, but your character is what's gonna keep someone there and help develop that relationship. And the same thing goes for any type of relationship. Why would you put someone in a position that you don't trust that they're gonna do what they're gonna do? I have a quick story, real quick, how that played out for me recently. I've been out of the league for like a year and a half now, trying to get back in. I was a free agent all of 25, and I was signed to a UFL team this spring, but I had been a relationship with the NFL team I had been cultivating is through the Colts, and I had a workout with them this February, and that really came about because of my reputation and my character that I built with someone back at Purdue. There is a family, the Tyler Trent family is a kid that he was kind of an honorary captain for us. Unfortunately, he had a bad case of bone cancer, and that 2018 season, he became a really integrated with our team. And I ended up getting really close with his family, and a few of us did. And I kept that relationship going just because it was something that was important to me. And I guess now 6 years down the line, I was at a spring game at Purdue, was telling his dad, Tony Trent, about my situation. Well, he plays golf with Chris Ballard, the GM, all the time, and he put a word in for me, gave me his contact, and that led to me being able to have a direct line of communication to Chris Ballard to be able to, and he will text me back whenever I text him and try to help me in my situation. And that led to me getting a workout this February, which we'll see what happens, but hopefully it leads to me getting another opportunity in the NFL. But that's just a specific example of how that's played out for me.
Yeah, and like these guys have said, I mean, talent wins out. I mean, you got to be able to play. But in terms of, but the end, as far as that character is huge in terms of when teams, not only on the college level, the NFL level, are looking to kind of evaluate guys. Let's say everything's kind of even. Like CJ and Marcus has said, in terms of, hey, can we trust this guy? What type of person is he? What type of worker is he? I mean, CJ would know in terms of, hey, a guy who's a walk on at Ohio State plays in the league. That's because in terms of a character standpoint there, and to be able to work hard. And I think that's where guys, sometimes don't take advantage of their talents as much as they could.
That's great advice. And so Marcus, you played for some incredible coaches throughout your career. So what made, some of those coaches stand out? What did some of the best coaches that you played for really do to kind of make you better? What stood out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about character. I think it goes the same way the other way. You can What stands out to me about some of the best coaches I've had is you can feel their authenticity. And their genuine intention when trying to build a relationship with you. You feel like he actually cares about you and is devoting real time and energy to developing you as a player. Doesn't just, see you as just a player, sees you as a human, as a man, and you can feel the difference there. Um, Being authentic, developing those relationships, and then another thing is enforcing the standards fairly. Every person is different, so you're not going to be able to treat people the exact same based on your personality types and how people respond. But these standards for, especially in a football perspective, like what we want in a specific coverage or play, those should be upheld no matter if you're the starter or if you're a practice squad guy. And I've had it both ways. I've had coaches where it's very obvious in the film room that they are not trying to ruffle any feathers with the starters or the big name guys. And it's very obvious when we go through film and they gloss over or intentionally skip over plays where that individual messed up and they don't call them out. But then they will overly call out a player that really didn't mess up even that bad just to make up for it. And that definitely is obvious to guys in the room and it makes you seem like a fraud. So I've had that happen and it's definitely frustrating, but I've had it happen the other way where you're like, okay, this guy is gonna, he's going to criticize and get on and the starter the same level that he is with a backup, a special teams guy, or a practice squad guy. So those three things: the authenticity, your intention with building a relationship, and enforcing your standards and upholding them fairly amongst everyone that you're responsible for.
It's great. Again, things that apply all through life. And I think for our next question, I mean, we're really fortunate to have, two guys that were captains at, elite D1 football programs and, looking at leadership in a college and professional locker rooms. So we know that coaches and administrators are, really focused on culture and teamwork. And what can these coaches emphasize to their players about what it looks like at a higher level of sports?
Yeah, I think if to be an effective leader, you first have to gain the respect and trust of those around you. It it doesn't work if you immediately try to be a vocal leader, but you have not earned your stripes, or you haven't put the time in. And especially in a football setting, the you have to walk the walk before you talk the talk. And you lead by example first, and you show that through your consistency, your dedication to the craft. And then it also has to show up on game day too. You have the combination of that. Now you built the trust of your competence. You have to trust your character as well, that you are who you say you are. You're doing the things that you say you're going to do, as we talked about before. And then the part that makes you a really effective leader is you have to understand how to communicate with all different types of people. You have to, as much as possible, try to be authentic when you're a leader. It's tough when when you yourself are a high school athlete and college athlete, you yourself are not fully developed. You haven't had a lot of experience in life to be able to, have the emotional regulation and intelligence to meet guys where they need to be met the same way a high level executive or CEO would, but just trying to be authentic as much as possible. And if you actually are putting the work in and the results are showing, then you should feel confident and comfortable speaking to others if it's coming from good intentions. And it has to be the same way when you hold guys accountable too. If you become a leader and you're doing these things and you're called on to be a leader, you have to hold guys accountable to the standard. And it's well received when you're someone that's actually doing it yourself, and then fine tuning that as knowing what guy you need to actually be more aggressive with or assertive with versus the other guys you have a personal relationship with. Maybe you talk to them on the side. So that's it's a constant development process trying to be a good leader. And it's so many intangibles and so many factors that lead to being an effective leader. I've been around some amazing ones that just do it so well and they speak so effortlessly. But the main thing is you have to cultivate trust and respect before you try to do that.
And I think too, Marcus, I think the big thing that I saw from the collegiate and professional space is the higher you go in sports, everybody is good, right? Like if you're playing the Division I level, you're a heck of a player. If you are fortunate enough to go play at the professional space, you are a heck of a player, no matter if you're the starter or on practice squad. And so I think when you think leadership, it's less about your skill and it's more about to Marcus's point, right, who you are. And so two things that I always carried with me and saw, at least at the collegiate and professional level, as far as leadership goes, is the great saying that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Like we've talked about many times already. Like clearly there is an importance on how you care about people in those relationships you foster. But then also I think it's and Marcus touched on it, is that consistency. Anybody can do it one time. Coach Hartline would say it all the time at Ohio State. Anybody can do it once if you're at this level. Who can show up day after day after day when things are going well, when things are going not so well, and it's going to continue to still be that same person? I think those are some things that when you look at the best leaders in probably your lives, I know in mine, it's like, hey, they're the same person every time I see them. And that's not to say their life is perfect, but they have an intentionality about showing up every single day with a mindset to serve others, to get better, to improve. And so I think those are some of the biggest things I've seen as far as leadership in the higher levels.
That's great. And so Marcus, if you could go back and talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you say? And, from that, what can coaches, administrators, and parents that might be listening, how can they use that to go interact with their athletes?
I think there's a lot of like specific things that I would tell myself about training and all this, et cetera. But at a high level conceptually, I think, and I've always been wired to be a perfectionist. And I think that is what allowed me to have such high standards for myself and ultimately helped me get to where I am. But it was often destructive. And I remember if small inconveniences would happen or I would miss a tackle in a game or something, I would still go out there and perform, but mentally I was not. I would lose my confidence quickly and I would get discouraged often. And what I would tell myself is that keep doing everything you're doing and stop overthinking every little thing. If you keep doing what you're doing, things are going to work out. And for high school coaches or college coaches helping high school athletes, is that adversity is inevitable in life. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And you have to be someone that understands that that's just the ebbs and flows of life. And you have to be able to respond to it. You can't control what happens to you all the time, but you can control how you respond to it. And I think I could have been better off and better served if I didn't take everything so seriously, not like serious in terms of like chasing my career, but just getting so down on myself. I think that I'd have been in a better headspace a lot of times if I let things fly more and just accepted that was just part of life.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I don't know how often my kids aren't going to grow up to be pro athletes, but how often I have to say they need to be easier on each other and especially on themselves more so than anything. And we all tend to beat ourselves up. And so so we've really covered here recruiting, leadership, and we talked about NIL earlier in the conversation. As NIL is coming into a play with younger and younger age athletes, that's thrown around a lot. CJ, what does that really mean to you?
Yeah, we've touched on it already in this conversation, but right, it's the ability that it is somewhat new in the grand scheme of the timeline of sports, but it's the ability to get paid off of, again, your name, image, and your likeness. And so I like to think as an athlete, you have a unique set of skills, right? You may be fast, you might be really quick, you might be really strong, whatever it is, but then off the field, you have an equal set of skills. And so I think the opportunity is incredible that you now have the ability to partner with brands, with companies, with people that align with your culture, with who you are, and be able to see income from that. So at a high level, it is just the ability to get paid for who you are, what your name represents, the image that you represent, in the likeness that you carry. So that's kind of high level what NIL represents.
So how do you think that coaches can help athletes through all of this? And how do you balance, enjoying today's opportunity while still preparing yourself for life after sports?
That's a great question. And I really think it comes down to, again, perspective. I think as our role, now that I have since finished my playing career and I'm in a position where I am guiding and advising and working with athletes and their families, it's providing that perspective that you alone as a young athlete just don't have, right? You just haven't lived enough life. You haven't been through as much as those older than you. And so I think as a coach, administrator, mentor, using that perspective to help those that you care about, the athletes you work with, and one saying, hey, here's what we're dealing with, right? I've seen a little bit more. Here's some pitfalls to maybe avoid. Here's some things to consider. I think your role is evolving as a coach and as a mentor in that way, where you probably, again, are being asked more unique questions than maybe you were 5, 10 years ago before the NIL came into the picture. So I think at the end of the day, if you can provide that perspective, right, it will allow the athlete to gain some of that wisdom and realize, hey, I probably don't want to go ahead and spend all this money right away, or maybe for whatever reason I don't align with that brand or just view things differently and choose to turn that opportunity down. There's so much more that goes into it, and that complexity, but I think at a high level, that's probably a good starting point, as you as a mentor being able to provide that perspective to the athletes that you work with.
So, you have a player who gets approached and he signs a deal, starts to earn income from that deal. What's the first thing they should do when they start receiving payments?
First thing first is I think you want to take a deep breath, right? Again, you're experiencing some level of wealth and income at an extremely young age due to your talent and your ability, which is, again, incredible. We love it. Take full advantage of it. But I do think a lot comes with that. Again, you're navigating waters that you just probably have never experienced before. And so I think first and foremost, hey, let's take a deep breath from just a psychological standpoint. Let's not be in a rush to go do everything we want to do. Let's kind of put a plan in place. So one, take a deep breath. And then probably 1B is a big issue, is that, hey, as we see this income, I'm an athlete, I see this income, is that we're going to be taxed on that money. And to no fault of younger individuals, right? Again, you just don't have the life experience to know that, hey, 1B is probably, let's prepare for that strategically. Like let's set up some of that money to go to the side, knowing that we're going to owe on this money we receive. I think that's probably a good 1A, 1B, to just say, hey, let's take a deep breath. Let's prepare accordingly, that taxes are going to be part of the picture. And then we can start to develop, okay, what are some things we maybe want to do with this money? That's probably a good starting point, that if you're a coach, administrator listening, that you're dealing with athletes that are starting to see this sort of situation, is that's probably a good starting point to just set yourself up well for success. And you don't want to get behind the 8 ball there. So those are probably my 1A, 1B. Take a deep breath. Let's prepare for taxes. The rest of the complexity can come later, but as long as we're kind of checking that box, we feel probably that we're on at least a good start to handling our finances well.
Yeah, that's a great advice. Taxes first, is, obviously you have situations where it's, the kid's chance to learn what taxes are, but probably a lot of families, this might be the first time the families really experience, any type of material taxation. And so, not having someone in the household that really knows how to experience that. So having, someone like Justin or someone like CJ, that can kind of help them through the process is really important. So we have a few questions that came in that were submitted prior to the webinar. So we're just going to turn over to the Q&A. The first question we have, there's been a lot of talk taking place about the recruiting process, and a lot of big headlines about, this guy got 2 million, this guy got $8 million NIL packages. So how much money are they getting coming out of school? How much is really happening out there? And what other metrics should players be looking at just beyond dollars when they're considering their future?
Well, I think in terms of the big thing comes in regards to the structure of the contract, how the payments are getting paid out. Are there upfront payments? Are there as far as payments in terms of in the months, leading up to far as the season? Is it their payments during the season, after the season? I think that's a big thing. And really in terms of the language, what's going to happen if you take this NIL package and then you want to transfer? Is there some of money that, or as you have to pay back? Is there penalties that are incurring there? We've seen in terms of cases where people are trying to get far as money, the schools are trying to get money back from the athlete that then decides to transfer. So I think those are two really things in terms of far as structure and language there, as well as, and then, terms of far as what's the football, what's the coaching, what are those things going to be that's going to prepare you not just for when you're a freshman in college, but the next year and leading up to, what is your goal in terms of the playing after, far as, college. I think in terms of we see, hey, you go into any school that's got a football program, you ask the team who all wants to play in the NFL. Every single one will raise their hand. Now we know every single one won't be able to do that, but what can you do to be able to put yourself in the best position to maximize not only your college career, but to take it to the next level?
Yeah, that was actually informative for me from hearing the contract side of it because I didn't go through NIL from a legality standpoint. But from my perspective, I would reframe it a little bit. Instead of just focusing on the dollar amount, what is your return on your overall college experience? And that was some of the things Justin touched on at the end there. It's it's your overall, like it's the totality of it. It's the money somewhat, but it's the NFL pipeline if that's your aspirations. It's your development. It is the staff there. What's the stability looking like? What does it look like going forward? What's the as much as possible predicting the likelihood that those same coaches will be there? What resources do they have in terms of the training room? What modalities do they have? Do they really prioritize the recovery? What does the campus look like? How close, how walkable is it? Do you have access to things you need to be successful? How do you like the strength coaches? Do you like the way they structure the program? The academic and education and network side of it, just from the university standpoint that I touched on earlier. How much are you going to be able to tap into that once you graduate? Do they have a huge programs set up for guys to be able to effectively, you know, transition? It's overall, what is your return on your college experience? And then, I mean, how many guys have actually gone to the NFL and what is the track record of those specific coaches at helping guys develop? What are the performances of guys they've coached look like over the course of their time with that same coach? There's just a lot of factors and more that I'm even talking about now that you have to look into, but it just comes down to your overall return forward thinking on your college experience, not just the immediate dollar value, the immediate gratification. You have to think about it more long term.
A great word. And just to follow up and summarize in my own way, I think the outside of just the financial piece, what I would recommend looking at is one, the culture, right? Like what is the culture of that program? What does the head coach down to the position coaches, down to the strength staff and so forth, as you keep working through the program, what do they believe in? What do they preach that is important to them and to the development, as Markus said, of the athletes that they coach? Culture, right? It's really hard to quantify, but if it's there, you feel it and you know what that feels like. And so I would say that asking those questions about, hey, what do you believe it at your core? What matters to this program? What are you going to instill into me as a player? I think that is something that's critical. When you think of outside of just the financial piece, what sort of metric can you be looking at? And then again, football is going to end for everybody, whether you're the best player in the world or you end at the high school level, right? We're all going to move on at some point. So I think Marcus has touched on it a couple of times. Like, what else can that school provide? What is the education like? What is the network all about? I think those pieces are probably underrated in conversations through the recruiting process, because you're gonna experience a lot of life post sports, no matter how long you play. And so I think being able to be set up in a good way, it should be a point of emphasis from a recruiting standpoint.
That's great, CJ, and a great segue into, we have another really good question in regards to, life after sports. So, unless your name is LeBron, at someday your career in athletics will come to an end. And whether that's after high school or your professional career, knowing that, what support is considered, after an athlete retires and hangs it up.
It's a great question. I think I'll answer it just quickly in two ways. I think first and foremost, my role now is unique because the relationship expands and continues beyond just the player's life cycle of their career, right? It's, hey, helping them navigate those transitions beyond sports and those situations that they're going through from a financial basis. So I think that is kind of a cool thing from the almost the financial advising side. But then as you're going through the process, it is kind of that network and those relationships that you've built, right? As Marcus shared an incredible story earlier of how, hey, treating people well, treating people with respect, doing what you say you're going to do, ended up giving him another opportunity and opened a door for him 8 years down the road. And so again, you don't necessarily treat people for that reason, but I think that's just some goodwill that comes from being someone that pours into other people. So I would just encourage those that are listening and those that are working with athletes is to, again, just pouring the importance of caring for those you're around, the network, the relationships that you build. They're critically important to your life, not only as an athlete, but then that second, third career post sports in particular.
Yeah, I'm still currently trying to play, but I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and I'm kind of going through the transition now. And it is difficult. And there's things that I wish I would have applied myself more in earlier. Even though I know I will be okay and I've set myself up to be okay. But part of that is when you're playing in college, there are resources and there's support available to you if you go seek it and find it and you want to apply yourself. Most universities, they have some type of career fair, they have some type of transition program or things where you can just expose yourself to different industries, and it makes you start thinking about what you really want to do. I think thinking about it more tangibly while you're still playing, it's going to help you be able to navigate that more, and just exposing yourself and forcing yourself to learn other things in your free time, as opposed to just listening to music or doing whatever. You turn on a podcast or read a book. You do that every now and then, even just a little bit of time. The younger you start, the better. That the cumulative effect of that, it adds up over time, and then you have a better picture in your mind of like, okay, these are some possible things I can go into. And then also while you're playing in college, making sure you stay close with the guys you play with, because most of those guys you play with are not going to play in the NFL. I mean, there was only two people in my class that played, and I played the longest in my class. And then those guys are going to have to transition. And so then you can tap back into that network and see what guys are doing. Um, and then if you're playing football in college, if you in the summer times, a bunch of guys would do like summer internships. And I never thought to do it. I didn't think I had the time, but guys who made it a priority, they did make it the time to do it. I think that sets you up well for when you have to transition. You never know. I mean, some guys have a better idea of like, yeah, I'm probably not going to make it all the way. But other guys, like, I mean, I thought I'd be playing 10 years for sure. But now I'm sitting here after 5 years and it's like, I'm not sure yet. You know what I mean? So it's just, I would have definitely started crystallizing things and getting more clarity on things sooner. and really force myself to educate myself sooner on things. So my advice is just to tell these kids to apply themselves sooner, and there are resources there if you want to apply yourself.
Yeah, and I think going, piggyback on what these guys have said, in terms of having a plan, having a discussion, as far as sooner, as far as if you're representing a player, as far as, putting stuff in place. Again, the goal is to have a long NFL career, but in terms of, hey, let's say a guy plays 10 years in the league and starts when he's 22, he's still 32 years old, very young. What's he want to do there? So even as far as that rookie year, they're having that plan in place. And then we look at, for as CJ and Markus, these guys played at big, 10 universities, the Ohio State, for as Purdue. So in terms of that alumni base, and I think in terms of what we talked about in terms of when the guys transfer, four times in 4 years, they don't have that alumni base that CJ playing as far as those years at Ohio State, or Markus playing at Purdue, where those guys can then go back in terms of be able to tap into that bigger alumni base, not the guys that they even played with, but in terms of the business leaders that have invested in those universities that want to help succeed as far as the athletes to be able to take that next level.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, really lean on those. You have massive alumni base, and even the guy who's the hiring manager that's just a fan. You have a big leg up in the hiring process, and we've seen that throughout the years, and different guys as they come out of the NFL, or even just coming out of some of these big D1 schools, really really big asset to use. So this has been a great conversation, and I want to thank our panelists for being here. Are there any last closing thoughts that any of you want to leave our audience with?
I agree. I'm thankful to be a part of this conversation and be a resource. And I think for those listening, again, I just encourage you with whatever your role is in how you are impacting the kids and the athletes that you're working with. The impact is meaningful and it's real, right? My high school, college, my coaches were some of the most impactful people throughout my life. And so I just encourage you to continue to lean into that role, right? Yes, the X's and O's are important. We love that. We play the sports to win. With that being said, the lessons you learn through sports are what's going to carry with you. And so I just encourage those listening that to really lean into that position that you have, and it really is important. So just keep on going and keep leading those that you have the opportunity to lead.
Yeah, I'm also very thankful to have been on this. It was a great experience for me, and to you guys out there that are listening, that are responsible for developing and teaching these young guys. It's like we just talked about. Make sure you're building these relationships, and you're emphasizing the importance of things outside of football. One thing I'm realizing is it's ironic. A lot of the traits that allow you to have success as an athlete, you have to have the drive and ambition to want to be the best. And most athletes who make it that level, they hate losing and they hate not being the best. And that drives you so much to actually get into that space where you are around the best. But then when it's time to transition, those same qualities and traits that allowed you to get to that point is what makes it hard to transition, because in comparison to the highest of the highs, it seems like you failed because you're not at that level anymore. And I encourage you guys that are helping these young guys, to help them reframe it, and how CJ said, to like the qualities and characteristics, they transfer to so many other things outside of football that you can be successful in if you apply yourself. I think those are just some things to think about. I appreciate appreciate you guys for being on here and for allowing me to be on this panel. Yeah, so those are my closing thoughts.
Yeah, and again, I sentiment for us, thanks for taking the time to be able to kind of for us get to know more about the process. Appreciate being on with CJ, and Marcus, as well as you, Mark. I think the biggest thing is just for us reach out to people who are in the space. Unfortunately, it is a business now. Even you're in high school there, so for us lean on to people that you know, or in terms of for us reaching out to guys, in that space to be able to something that you don't know to be able to help others, whether it's the NIL, the rev share, the agent space, the financial advisor space. There's people to help, and for us make sure you get good people on your team.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you everyone for for being here today, and just really want to thank all of our panelists, both Justin, CJ, and Marcus for all the great info. Want to let everyone know that there's going to be a replay available that we'll send out along with everyone's contact info. So don't hesitate to reach out, and definitely I'd always say you don't want to go it alone. This is something that if your family or someone who's negotiating an NIL contract, you don't want to go up against someone who's done this 100 times when it's your first time. So I think that's just really one of the very key areas of making sure to get help early, before you sign that contract, because once you sign the contract, you sign the contract. So we've got great resources here, and feel free to reach out. And thank you everybody for watching.